Total Pro Sports presents the 9 most shocking MLB scandals of all time. It wasn't too long ago that the St. Louis Cardinals front office was investigated by the FBI for hacking into the Houston Astros database of proprietary statistics and confidential communications. Of course, despite the overabundance of hot takes on that scandal, which offered a myriad of theories presented as facts as to who did what and why, at this point we don't actually know very much. Somebody accessed the Astros computer system, and that somebody is a member of the Cardinals front office. But who did it and why they did it, which will determine the severity of this transgression and subsequent punishment from the MLB, that's not so clear. Which brings us to our most shocking MLB scandals of all time list. Where will this one rank in the history of the MLB scandals? No one quite knows for sure, but feel free to draw your own conclusions on the list we have for you today. Number 9. Tie. BIOGENESIS and Mitchell Report. Neither the Mitchell Report nor the BIOGENESIS scandals were really shocking. By 2003 or so, everybody realized that the muscle-bound dudes hitting 600-foot home runs by the dozen were probably juicing. Still, when the Mitchell Report was released in 2007, summarizing the investigation into the use of PEDs, and in baseball, and more importantly, naming names, it was a very big deal. It turns out that it wasn't just the meatheads obliterating home run records that were taking steroids. It was also pitchers like Roger Clemens and Andy Pettitte, as well as guys nobody had ever even heard of. As for the BIOGENESIS scandal in 2013, which blew the lid off the second wave of PED, that's performance-enhancing drug, use in baseball, it did not catch the fans completely off guard. But it certainly had a huge impact on the game, earning historic suspensions for A-Rod and Ryan Braun, as well as regular old suspensions for guys like Nelson Cruz, Johnny Peralta, and 10 others. Number 8. Al Campanis NIGHTLINE interview. This scandal seems to have been largely forgotten. But in 1987, the 40th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball, Ted Koppel interviewed Dodgers general manager Al Campanis on ABC's NIGHTLINE. It was a natural choice since he was general manager, had played with Robinson, and was known to be his friend. Unfortunately, when Koppel asked Campanis why there weren't more black managers and general managers in Major League Baseball, the guy said, and I quote, "Blacks may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager." Realizing how terrible that came off, Koppel tried to give Campanis a chance to clarify his position, but Campanis didn't take it. In fact, he made it worse by talking about how black people don't swim well, and I quote, "because they don't have the buoyancy." Obviously, people were outraged, and not long after the interview, Campanis resigned. The sad thing is, black and Latin players who knew Campanis defended him, insisting that he is not a racist and just misspoke. But you cannot unsay certain things. Number 7. Marge Schott shares her thoughts on Hitler. Former Cincinnati Reds owner Marge Schott said all sorts of racist things over the years about all sorts of people. One of her employees, for example, accused her of saying, and I quote, "sneaky goddamn Jews are all alike," end quote. And a Sports Illustrated interview quoted her explaining how she didn't like it when Asian American kids outperformed, quote, "our kids," end quote, in high school. However, the worst, most scandalous thing Marge Schott ever said was about Hitler, as in, Adolf, the most reviled man of the 20th century, who orchestrated the murder of 6 million Jews. In an interview on ESPN in 1996, Schott said of Hitler, and I quote, "everybody knows he was good at the beginning, but he just went too far," end quote. Obviously, people didn't think that was such a great thing to say. 3 years later, she was gently encouraged to sell the team. Number 6. Owner collusion scandals. In 1985, former Yankees GM and American League President Lee MacPhail, pitcher left, then the director of the Player Relations Committee, gave a speech to the MLB owners encouraging them to exercise more self-discipline and resist the temptation to give in to unreasonable demands of experienced marginal players. The next month, MLB Commissioner Peter Ueberroth told a group of owners that giving players long-term contracts was dumb. And the month after that, at the winter meetings, everyone was talking about fiscal responsibility. Of course, what they were all really talking about was driving down salaries by agreeing not to sign each other's free agents. So when the Tigers' Kirk Gibson, one of the best outfielders in baseball, became a free agent after the 1985 season, nobody made him an offer. Ditto for Tommy John, Phil Niekro, and Carlton Fisk. The MLBPA was suspicious immediately and filed a complaint. MLB toned down their efforts over the next 2 seasons to make them less obvious, but they were still screwing players over, driving salaries down for the first time since the advent of free agency. As a result, there were still grievances filed. By 1990, the players had won all their grievances, and it was determined that owners had bilked them out of $280 million, which is like $509 million in 2015 dollars. Number 5. Pittsburgh drug trials. In 1985, the same year that owners began colluding to put the kibosh on free agency, 13 former and current Major League Baseball players were called before grand jury in Pittsburgh to testify against a drug ring. 7 of the players were Pittsburgh Pirates. They were Dale Berra, Lee Lacy, Lee Mazzilli, John Milner, Dave Parker, and Rod Scurry. The other 6 were Willie Mays Aikens, Vida Blue, Enos Cabell, Keith Hernandez, Jeffrey Leonard, Tim Raines, and Lonnie Smith. Their testimony? It blew people away. Cocaine use was rampant in Major League Baseball. Keith Hernandez estimated that 40% of players were snorting in those days. Tim Raines said that he used to keep a vial of coke in his pocket, and John Milner admitted to buying coke during a game in a Three Rivers Stadium bathroom stall. In the end, MLB suspended 11 of the 13 players. However, all of the suspensions were commuted in exchange for fines and community service. Number 4. Steinbrenner suspension. In 1981, late Yankees owner George Steinbrenner signed Dave Winfield away from the Padres with a 10-year, $23 million deal and made him the highest-paid player in baseball. Isn't that cute? And over the next 8 years, Winfield hit .291, .357, .497, averaging 25 home runs and 102 RBI a year. Unfortunately, that was not good enough for the boss, who felt that Winfield choked in September and October. So in 1989, in an effort to get out of the last few years of the Winfield contract, George Steinbrenner paid a gambler named Howie Spira $40,000 to dig up dirt on Winfield. Let me repeat that. A Major League Baseball owner paid a guy to find incriminating information about one of his players so he could use that to release the guy. Of course, Spira, being a scumbag, decided to extort Steinbrenner, and when the MLB found out what was going on in 1990, Steinbrenner got a lifetime ban from Commissioner Fay Vincent, which was commuted 3 years later. Number 3. 1994 World Series canceled. There were a lot of things that led up to the 1994 players' strike, but the biggest issue had to do with the proposed salary cap. Owners wanted one, players did not. So when negotiations failed to go anywhere, the players walked off the job on August 12th. Then on September 14th, with a deal not yet in place, MLB canceled the remainder of the season and the entire postseason. It was the first time that the World Series had been canceled since 1904, and the first time one of the major sports leagues had canceled its postseason. The NHL would later become the second in 2004-2005. Fans, of course, were outraged, and it would take over a decade for the league to recover. However, in the end, players were right. MLB didn't need a salary cap. The league practically prints money these days, and players' salaries are astronomical. Number 2. Pete Rose gambling scandal. You want a scandal that shocked the sports world? This one shocked the sports world. On March 21, 1989, Sports Illustrated published a story claiming that Pete Rose, baseball's hit king and manager of the Cincinnati Reds, had been betting on baseball since at least 1985. Rose denied it, of course, but on August 28, 1989, Commissioner Bart Giamatti banned Rose from the game for life. Of course, this has been a raging debate within the game ever since. Some say Rose has served his due and should be reinstated in some capacity. Others say he violated the game's most sacred rule and should remain banned. Either way, it's one of the biggest scandals in sports history, let alone baseball. And number 1, the Black Sox scandal. The most shocking MLB scandal of all time? Yep, it's the Chicago Black Sox scandal, in which 8 members of the White Sox were accused of taking money from gamblers to throw the 1919 World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. Did they do it? Definitely. Or at least some of them did. What everyone still debates is whether shoeless Joe Jackson was in on it. Some say he was not, citing his solid batting line in the series that year. Others say the guilty players gave him a cut of the money, but he didn't want it, while others still insist he was in on it, citing the fact that Jackson played much worse in the games the White Sox lost. Whether or not Jackson was in on the fix, though, the Black Sox scandal is still the biggest in Major League Baseball history nearly 100 years later. And that's it for the 9 most shocking Major League Baseball scandals of all time. But wait, we are not done with you yet. In the comments below, let us know what you think the most infamous scandal is of all time, not just in Major League Baseball, but in sports, period. And for more video updates from Total Pro Sports, click subscribe.